Since the time I first started playing video games, I was an explorer. From the open world of the first Cars video game on the PlayStation 2 and Minecraft, to the Red Dead Redemption 2, Fallout 4, and still Minecraft. I was never complacent to just sit around and watch the world go by. After all, day-to-day real life had enough of that already. For roughly 8 hours a day, I went from elementary school to middle school to high school for 13 years, sitting and regurgitating the test material. But when I was home, that was my time. I could relax and my mind could just race in the best possible ways, always flying from one daydream to the next, and every time my attention was demanded from school, I was ripped out of one daydream and settled back into the next. And that was life. But once I was sitting in front of that television, the world was my oyster. Racing into first place with the Cars characters, or building a very mediocre castle predominantly from one type of block, I could just do, and thoughts came when necessary. Before long, I was playing COD and Total War, my 11-year-old self and friends freaking out as we finally hit level 30 in Black Ops 1 Zombies, or spending weeks building Prussia into a global superpower in Empire Total War. But that serenity of nothing but a wild, open world never left. Mining in an old abandoned mine shaft, or walking for thousands and thousands of blocks as a Minecraft nomad, never seemed to lose its luster. There was always something just over the next hill, a village or a desert pyramid, and lots of times a view to match. Even though I was alone, I was never bored. But as the industry developed, so did myself, and the environments that shaped my imagination. Things got darker and grittier. The sunny skies of Radiator Springs got replaced by the drab landscape of Skyrim. And though the land of Red Dead Redemption 2 kept me coming back, the people reminded me to keep my lever action ready. But for the first time, I was completely enthralled. I bought Skyrim for the PS3 a few years after the initial release, and I never put it down. As a testament to that, when I remarked that I had logged over 2,000 hours on the PlayStation alone during a scouting function, I was met with a standing ovation. Skyrim became my favorite game and still remained my favorite game far and away until the release of the second Red Dead Redemption, which still shifts constantly between first and second place in my mind. I knew everything. I bought the game guide and crossed off every single item the moment I got it. I knew every corner and miscellaneous location, and most likely still do. But Skyrim was the first time I felt something new with a game. When dungeon crawling through Falmore-infested caves, or receiving that "we know" letter from the Dark Brotherhood, this was the first time my 12 to 13-year-old heart pounded with anxiety. That hard rush as I raced as fast as I could away from the sprinting giant as he conscripted me into the space program. And as I looked down from Riftenhold down to Jean March from the top of Ysgramor's teeth, I felt small. As if the world that I was spending my summer vacations with existed without me. That I wasn't the instigator of the events happening around me, but just another factor in an ever-evolving world. I was faced with opponents I couldn't possibly beat, at least not yet. Hounded by ice wraiths and fleeing from Forsworn, slowly attempting to whittle the health of the Heartgraven. These problems persisted with me, and I learned to love them. They were part of the journey, so when I got my hands on Red Dead Redemption 2, I was not expecting to be faced with the same whimsical feeling that I felt when I was 12 years old playing Skyrim for the first time, as well as a new feeling. The world was beautiful, the top of gaming marvels up to this point. It got to the degree that I was taking time at least once a week just to play the game and slowly ride around the map with Vercingetorix. But on top of the amazing views, lovable and hateable characters alike, I found something completely different. I found the mysteries. The Curse of Valentine, the massacre at Pleasance, and greatest of all, the missing Luxembourgian princess. Overnight, I was no longer just some adventurer doing fetch quests or collecting one of everything in the game. I was a detective now too. The world I was inhabiting in my free time became mysterious, a dark and malevolent place filled with darker deeds all draped in a beautiful setting. I joined a community of others, searching like myself for any clue pertaining to the mysteries we knew in our hearts were solvable. But it did sort of taint the landscape, I must admit. Looking down over the rocky cliffs into the valley, and being able to point out exactly where the human sacrifice site was, the Indian massacre, or the deceased smoke inhalation family was, added a coldness to the warmth of the rising sun. In noticing all these things, as I remained a speck on top of a mountain, I remembered that I'm only a man, and a good one. As Arthur Morgan, we know this world, and even though we filled out the map, continue to search with magnifying glasses, combing the streets of Saint Denis, or sitting in a shack in the middle of nowhere, getting to know a long-dead individual through the correspondence they left behind. Through all of this, one thing stays constant: either riding through the heartlands, or hunting in the tundras of Winterhold, or circumnavigating an ocean biome while completing that map room you've got set up back at base. It's all beautifully calming. My favorite architectural feature of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim has always been the ancient Nordic temples and barrows. I could talk for at least an hour on my personal analysis and what I reckon the Merethic era Skyrim would have looked like, but I've already talked a little about that in another video of mine. The discovery of long-forgotten structures serves as a motivating factor for all of us, I would assume, and there's something about it that awakens the historian in all of us, tracing our way back through long-forgotten or abandoned structures, rediscovering the stories the people left behind, and like a detective, except being called to the crime scene years and years after the fact. However, along with all these wonders and fascinations, with retracing the steps of people, whether they be ancient or just years ago, sometimes there's more to it than that, isn't there? What if we weren't the first ones like we thought? What if they're still around, squatting or skulking around the shadows while we look through every room in a house we assume is abandoned? On top of the fascination that comes with tracing your way through a seemingly abandoned or disused structure, there's also a fear, at least for me anyways. A feeling that when I turn a corner, some sort of malefactor or creature is waiting to take their revenge for me being on their turf. It adds a sense of trepidation, a motivation to either stay far away or dive in headfirst. And I feel that is very human. When I was a younger kid, me and a bunch of my friends would run outside the suburb and go to this abandoned land where a farm used to be before being bought out and never used. I spent my summers there for a couple years, carefully going over every section of this place with my friends. We found a decaying farmhouse, 2 barns, old farming equipment completely rusted over, and even these 2 houses that looked intact. One bright yellow and the other bright pink with some zebra print looking stuff on the side and the back. Rest assured we weren't going anywhere that appeared still lived in. It was our world for that time, and probably some of the most fun I've ever had in that period of my life. Exploring that old forgotten piece of land that was destined for development but no longer, stoked my curiosity for the remnants of humanity that had been left behind. Since the day we found that rotting farmhouse, we took to the woods every day during summer vacation, trying to look for more. There was even a day where we crawled on our bellies for what felt like an hour, underneath thick, unmovable thorn bushes, just to reach the shoreline of a part of a pond we didn't even know existed. We ended up with a mental map of every square inch of that place, being able to navigate effortlessly, when at one point each new expedition was full of caution and what-ifs. Then we stopped being afraid. We strode confidently through the fields of grass that had never been maintained since they grew from the fields of a once large farm. But what comes from decay also comes the new life. We weren't on some massive dirt plain with structures in it. We felt like we were entering into some massive forest, and the rediscovering of these structures left decaying, surrounded by acres of woodland, felt meaningful, almost like we had done the old owners a service by appreciating these buildings that they had erected decades ago. Whether the previous owners were dead or alive, or some mix of the two, we had no idea. But maybe for the first time in perhaps a decade, these buildings meant something to people. They meant something to me. And they were the focal point of that forest, a center which invited Mother Nature back into the land, in a locality that was so quickly developing. From beauty it was sculpted, and to beauty it returns. Decay is ugly. I won't attempt to convince you otherwise, but it is necessary and a part of a cycle that everything on this planet goes through. However, so is restoration. Have you ever found an abandoned mineshaft in Minecraft and attempted to restore it and improve upon it? I remember trying to restore an entire abandoned mineshaft with a functional track system and everything. This goes to any game with a building aspect to it. I wandered about the nuclear ruins of Boston and built a Minutemen Republic the likes of which had never been seen in that world before. Though I wasn't alone by far, I was still very much an explorer. And us, whether we are explorers of a video game or lands in real life, we can see these cycles taking place. And those places mean something to us. All of us. I wanted to call this essay exploration is therapy. Because that's what I feel it truly is. A chance to deeply connect with a world that has infinite stories and experiences to unearth. After all, people hurt people, but the land is a true neutral. Whether alone or with friends, there is much to gain emotionally, mentally, and spiritually from a land seemingly forgotten. So go exploring. You just might love it.